9. Kim Jong-un's Pleasure Squad. In North Korea, the tradition of picking a team of 30 to 40 attractive women to entertain the ruler goes back many generations. These groups, specifically known as pleasure squads, are tasked with offering traditional entertainment, like song and dance, as well as more adult entertainment, which involves tending to other needs that we'd rather leave unmentioned. To paint a better picture, though, we will note that the selected women must be virgins. In 2010, a former member of one of Kim Jong-il's pleasure squads, named Mi Hyang, spoke publicly with the press about what her life was like as one of the former dictator's elite servants. She only decided to share her story after defecting to South Korea. The information she gave offered a rare glimpse into the elusive leader's life. The man's son, Kim Jong-un, went on to inherit the dictatorship following his death in 2011. Mi Hyang described Kim Jong-il as completely normal-looking at first, like a next-door neighbor. She even said that the leader acted considerate toward her. But at the end of the day, he was still a dictator, and so is his son, which is why nobody should have been surprised when the pleasure squad tradition continued strong after Kim Jong-un took over North Korea's leadership, even though some people had hopes that the new dictator would phase out some of the country's more archaic customs. Kim Jong-un seemed to be done with the pleasure squad for the first several years of his reign, but he decided to revive the tradition in 2015. It now seems as though this secretive group of entertainers is here to stay, at least as long as Kim Jong-un remains in the seat of power. 8. North Korean elections. About every 4 to 5 years, a so-called election is held for North Korea's national legislature, the Supreme People's Assembly, or SPA, while elections on the local level are held every 4 years. In case you haven't guessed it already, these events are not the same as the democratic elections people who live in Western countries are used to. According to the BBC, voting for the SPA is a mandatory requirement for citizens. But it's strange that there's no choice of candidates. In other words, the people don't actually have any say over who wins and who loses. All civilians 17 years old and up are required to participate in voting on voting day. Even though the results of the elections are predetermined, showing up early for the event is considered an acceptable display of loyalty to the Kim regime. The lines to vote are long, and while there is a private booth, nobody uses it, since doing so would raise suspicions of disloyalty. Even though there's only one option on who to vote for, voters technically have the right to cross out the name of the candidate listed on the slip, but most wouldn't dare try this, since they know that there are severe consequences for doing so, like having the secret police sent after them. When the guaranteed election winner is finally declared the winner, everyone is expected to act happy and overjoyed about the extremely predictable result. And just in case you were hoping the North Korean parliament has decision-making abilities, well, it doesn't. Described by the BBC as a rubber stamp body with no power, the SPA has basically zero influence, and it approves new laws only as a formality. 7. Prison camps. It's a little-known fact that North Korea is home to a large and ever-growing network of gulags that have been likened to conditions at Nazi-run concentration camps. Not much is known about what goes on within the dozens of labor camps that are believed to exist within the Hermit Kingdom, but it is thought that there are an estimated 200,000 inmates altogether. Only one person is known to have escaped one of these disturbing facilities. Shin Dong-hyuk was born inside the Kaichon internment camp, or Camp 14, in the early 80s. His parents were prisoners there who were allowed to get married, but didn't get to choose who their partner was. Similar to many who are locked up in North Korean labor camps, they were accused of committing crimes against the state, which includes even the slightest disagreement with the Kim dynasty's agenda and ideas. As a young boy, Shin lived with his mom and almost never saw his dad, who stayed somewhere else. He failed to form a bond with his mother thanks to the constant shortages at the camp, which caused him to see her as food competition. Prisoners at Camp 14 worked in a nearby mine and hydroelectric plant, Violence was a way of life among the guards, who routinely beat and killed inmates for committing small offenses or failing to keep up with the grueling pace the staff demanded. At one point, Shin was forced to watch his mother and brother be put to death for plotting an escape plan. Those who weren't plucked off by cruel employees often died from starvation, exhaustion, or disease. Shin finally escaped in 2005 while working on a remote mountain with little supervision. He managed to sneak across the border into China. The man was in his 20s when he experienced the outside world for the first time, and has since helped spread awareness about the horrors that take place inside North Korea's brutal labor camps. 6. Starvation and poverty. During the 1990s, North Korea fell victim to a devastating famine that killed an estimated 240,000 to 3.5 million people. The situation isn't quite as severe nowadays, but food insecurity is still a major issue in the Hermit Kingdom. In fact, during recent years, food shortages have grown increasingly worse. It's also notable that the farming industry and other economic sectors rely heavily on child labor to stay in operation. It's not unusual to see both children and adults begging for scraps in the streets. Unable to provide for their own people, the Kim regime relies heavily on foreign aid to keep civilians fed. Malnutrition rates are shockingly high. This flies directly in the face of the Juche ideology developed by the country's original founder, Kim Il-sung. These ideas are based on the concept of North Korea being self-sufficient and not needing to depend on other nations to provide for itself. But this has actually been the case for a long time. North Korea did well when the Soviet Union was helping its economy, but when the USSR crumbled, a lot of the country's problems with food shortages and failing to provide for its people started, and the Hermit Kingdom has never fully recovered. One reason tourism is overly controlled in North Korea is because authorities don't want images of people suffering to leak into the outside world. It's strictly forbidden for tourists to take pictures of anyone who isn't deemed well-dressed or healthy-looking by their tour guide. One famous photo that a photographer named Eric LaForge managed to capture without getting caught by his guide seems to show a very thin man collecting grass for a meal to eat at a public park. Other images show what seems like malnourished people and other evidence of the rampant poverty that plagues the country. While the realities of life in North Korea aren't necessarily all that surprising, seeing them captured on film is a wake-up call. 5. Empty streets, roads, and airports. Controlled North Korean propaganda makes the streets of its capital, Pyongyang, look busy and bustling. But that's a lie for the most part. Even in Pyongyang, where elite and privileged citizens live, car ownership is a rarity. Almost everyone in the country relies on public transportation, like the Pyongyang subway and regional trains. Special permission is required for civilians to travel outside their designated region, and people get in a lot of trouble for going anywhere other than their approved destinations. The roads are even more empty outside Pyongyang than they are in the city. It's rare to see a passing car, and it's even less common to see a vehicle that isn't owned by the government or military. In this photo that was captured by Eric LaForge, several military members are pushing a broken-down bus in an effort to either get it going again or move it out of the road. There are limited flights into and out of the Pyongyang International Airport, North Korea's main airport. Most flights go in and out from China and are operated by the country's only airline, Air Koryo. As you can probably imagine, the Pyongyang airport falls short of the booming tourist hub it seems like from the outside. 4. Its biggest building is a ghost hotel. It's impossible to not notice a tall, pyramid-shaped building that towers over the Pyongyang skyline. Even in pictures, it's distinctly larger than every other building surrounding it. This 105-story skyscraper, called the Ryugyong Hotel, was supposed to be Pyongyang's luxury hotel, but its real use is as a display board for propaganda. Construction on the hotel started back in 1987 during the reign of North Korea's original dictator Kim Il-sung. The plans called for the 3,000-room structure to be finished in 1992 for Kim Il-sung's 80th birthday, but the collapse of the Soviet Union triggered an economic crisis, putting the project on hold after the hotel reached its full height. The windowless, partially built structure fell into disrepair quickly, as it languished for over a decade with a rusting crane sitting beside it. During the 1990s, the European Chamber of Commerce inspected the building and deemed it irreparable. On top of noticing crooked elevator shafts, the committee questioned the quality of the construction materials themselves. For a while, the Hermit Kingdom tried to remove the Ryugyong Hotel from photos of the skyline, while the media nicknamed it the Hotel of Doom and the Phantom Hotel. But it was impossible to make the eyesore disappear. So, in 2008, construction resumed. North Korean officials set an opening date for 2012, but the plans were once again suspended. In 2018, an LED display was put onto the building's exterior for the purpose of displaying political propaganda. That's basically the only thing the Ryugyong Hotel has ever been used for, and the most recent photos of the interior show that the building is still bare. There are also continued concerns regarding its structural integrity. 3. Banned from laughing, drinking, and shopping. When North Korean dictators Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il passed away, the country had a mandated period of national mourning. News reporters showed journalists and civilians in what seemed to be a state of mass hysteria, as they wept in grief over the loss of their dear leader. As it turns out, death anniversaries of North Korea's dictators are marked in similarly depressing fashions. For the 11 days that marked the 10th anniversary of the death of North Korea's second dictator, Kim Jong-il, in 2011, people were banned from laughing, drinking alcohol, and more. Simply put, anything fun wasn't permitted during this time. On December 17th, the actual date of Kim Jong-il's death, citizens weren't even able to go grocery shopping. Instead of tending to their responsibilities, people were required to go to somber ceremonies commemorating the former leader. Anyone who broke the rules during these mandatory grieving periods put themselves at risk of being arrested. 2. You don't get to choose your job. In most, if not all, Western countries, civilians have the luxury of choosing what they want to do for a living after reaching adulthood. In many cases, people face challenges which get in the way of them being able to achieve their goals. Even in the free world, it's sometimes impossible to escape obstacles put forth by things like poverty or falling short of the requirements for a chosen career. But imagine living in a world where you had no say at all in your job. That's the reality citizens live in North Korea, where each job is chosen for an individual. And in case you're wondering, no, the playing field isn't level. Those who are born into privilege stand a much higher chance of living comfortably than those who are born into poverty. And people who are born poor have almost no chance of growing well off as an adult. In addition to having no choice over one's career, all able-bodied citizens are required to serve in the military, the world's fourth largest standing army, despite North Korea being the 56th most populous country. People are also told where they can live. And we don't just mean which city to live in. Each family's actual home is assigned to them. While it may sound nice not to pay rent or buy staple foods like rice, the state of North Korea over the past few decades proves that the current system is not really working. 1. How they scare people out of defecting. In more recent years, North Korean citizens have had increased access to information about what life is like outside their hermit kingdom. The information is reaching them in many ways, but is more accessible thanks to Western movies and TV shows that are smuggled into the country through the Chinese border. These materials are helping dispel a lot of myths that are taught to North Koreans from birth, including the belief that they live in the most advanced country on Earth, and that anything from outside its borders is bad, evil, or wrong in some way. All things considered, the temptation to defect is probably higher than ever, yet fewer people are making it out of the country alive. Why is that? Well, for one, Kim Jong-un has tightened border security, with agents working 24/7 with orders to shoot on sight. Civilians who get caught trying to escape and aren't shot on sight are sometimes killed in public executions that people are forced to attend, including innocent children. In cases where people fail to escape and aren't killed, they can count on being sent to one of the country's notorious labor camps, where they'll essentially be worked to death. Whether or not someone manages to escape, they can count on 3 generations of their family being punished. After all, if you knew your parents and grandparents would be imprisoned because you tried to flee your country, would you even try to leave? Many still do, and unfortunately, their relatives pay, even if they had no knowledge or involvement in the escape plan. If you had the chance to visit North Korea, would you take it, or would you respectfully decline the offer? Why or why not? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.